I was so impressed with how your company operates. You really seem to be concerned about the people who make the clothing that you sell. So tell us about that.
Well, we sort of learned firsthand the conditions of apparel workers when we first started our company, and it was a real shocker. It was a real wake-up call to me to see that most people who make the clothes that all of us wear are women. They're under or uneducated women. They're often single heads of households, and they do the same job year after year after year because they get paid by the piece. So they get fast at sleeve setting, and then they never want to move to a different position. So consequently, their bodies get, beat up from doing the same job for 20 and 30 years, and they end up with carpal tunnel and back problems and neck problems, etc. But the thing I noticed the most is that they're completely disenfranchised from the product they're making. Mm-hmm. They never had occasion to meet me or to know what organic was or to understand why we demanded cotton thread and all these things, until this one crisis that happened where I really worked with a group of sewers in Alabama to complete an order on time for Ben & Jerry's, mm-hmm. and they all got totally engaged and completely behind the project, and it was actually a T-shirt for a benefit concert to clean up a lake, mm-hmm. Lake Champlain in Vermont, and so I was able to really make the connection with them environmentally. And that day, just a light bulb went off for me, and I was like, if the people who made our clothes could really know the people who bought our clothes and vice versa, if they could understand more about each other's lives, I don't think that consumers would accept sweatshop-made clothing. I don't think we would be into this disposable economy as much. I guess I really believe in the inner sort of trust and hope and kindness in everyone. So that just taught me so much. And after that, we sort of changed our mission and made it as much about saving the lives of the garment workers as saving the acres of land from chemical cultivation. And it's just grown into this thing that has really pushed us beyond where we ever thought we'd go. And the more I learn and the more I relate to and the more our staff relates to these people who make our garments, the more important it is for us to not only tell their story to each other and share, anecdotes with each other, but tell our consumers, tell our audience, look at these lives, look at these people.
Right. You have it so beautifully displayed on your website, this transparency about your supply chain with pictures of everybody each step of the way. Now, most companies don't do that. I guess it's because the working conditions are not so great in other.
It could be. I mean, I don't think a lot of clothing companies really get to know beyond the sewers of mm-hmm. the garment, because a lot of times they go in. A classic conventional clothing company will go in with a design and say, I want this fabric in this color, make this garment. And because we do organic, we have to really go back through the production cycle. And as I mentioned, it's very convoluted. There's many stages. So we contract actually with farmers to grow acres of land under organic cultivation. So we know the farmers. And then we take it to the ginner and the knitter and the spinner and the dyer. So why shouldn't we try to pass along their stories to our audience as much as we can? We think that it's really the people who support us really want to know those stories, and it also helps us all get better and all learn more. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of been this organic growth, as it were. And it's funny that you mentioned that because it's the first time we've put the exact whole story on our website. Mm-hmm. We're getting a lot of positive feedback, so we're about to finish editing a video that will show the story, with people's voices and mm-hmm. interviewing people and watching what they do in their homes, etc. So
right. I see a documentary in the making here.
Thanks.
Sounds great.
We'll see.
And now go ahead.
No, I was just going to say it's fascinating, and their lives enrich ours, and we couldn't, it's hard to do what we do, and it was scary to put, Apre Nique is the name of our co-op we use in Nicaragua, because it's a very competitive industry, and I used to kind of play things really close to the chest and be very intimidated to let people know. And then at some point in time, I was just like, this is silly, because if we really have trusting long-term relationships with people, they'll only be enhanced if other people come and do their production there as well.
Right.
So it's been an eye-opener for me, and it's really been gratifying.
Now, tell us, you're the first company to be Fair Labor certified. So what does that mean exactly?
Well, that's interesting because, we try to do the right thing and we try to understand wages within local economies and are people fairly remunerated and do they get breaks and do they get paid for overtime and is there child labor and all that. But ultimately, we're the customer. And I always feel a little like when I'm in these plants or people here go down and visit, are we really seeing what happens on a daily basis, or are they just putting on a good show when we're there? And I've come to, there are certain signs that I can tell after all these years of going into plants, like whoever takes you on a tour, if they say hello and call each person by name when they take you on a tour, and if the person doesn't cringe and run away from you, it's usually a sign that they feel, empowered and good about their job. So there's little things we can check for, but we've always said we need more people who know more about labor conditions to come down and tour our facilities. And again, when we went sort of transparent, we said, let's let anybody who wants to come down to our plants come down. So a few years ago, we took a delegation down of business people, customers, into Nicaragua to show them how things were made. And then these independent certification companies started approaching us and saying, well, we want to not just certify organic and, food products, we want to try and start certifying apparel. So the company we chose to start with was SCS, Scientific Certification Systems, and they had put together a labor certification for flowers, and then they started adopting that into other segments of the industry. So we were kind of their test case for apparel, and we were certified. They came. What I liked about their program was they came to every step of production, including us and our screen printer. We're in Michigan. We have a warehouse, and they spent a half a day to a day, mostly a day, at every one of those stages of production, and they went through a whole list of, they looked at payroll records, they did all that sort of stuff. And we got the certification last December, I believe. And then we started making a line around the certification. And next, so what it did for us was actually kind of make us feel like we were doing, that we really are doing a good thing here. Mm-hmm. These guys said, this is good.
Absolutely.
And we also invited a labor rights activist from Washington, D.C. to accompany that inspection trip so that she could give us real good input from her travels all over the world. And she was really impressed, so that was really good to hear. And then this fall, we're also participating in Transfairs Pilot for Apparel, which is Transfairs, the organization that certifies bananas and coffee and chocolate and those things to fair trade standards. Mm-hmm. Their program is different, but at this point, we want to do as much fair trade, fair auditing certification as we can, because I believe we can learn more and get better. And, of course, we want to advertise that when we get it.
Right.
So part of it is a marketing thing as well.
Right. Now, you source your products from, like, family-owned businesses and worker cooperatives. So how is that different from other apparel companies? Where do they find workers?
Well, the worker-owned cooperative thing, we kind of have championed this cause and feel like it's a business model that can really work. So we have started a total of 3 worker-owned cooperatives, not by ourselves by any means. We work closely with a non-government organization, an NGO down in Nicaragua called Jubilee House Community, and they basically do the real hands-on work with the workers. We kind of pledge our sewing contracts, write business plans, sometimes loan them money or buy equipment. And that model, we believe, works so well because of this whole issue of wages and living wages. So the example I'll use is the first co-op we helped to form, which is called the Fair Trade Zone, and it's in outside of Managua, Nicaragua, in a basically slum called Nueva Vida. And the women built their own building, set up their own business structure, set up their own investment program so that each worker has one vote, and any decisions of size are made by all workers. What that did for us is it eliminated us having to check on were people paid fairly. Mm-hmm. If every worker gets a vote and every worker helps to determine the actual wages and the benefits and what to do with profits, it really frees us. And that's the part that I think is so interesting, because I don't know an apparel company from the teeny tiniest to the largest who doesn't use contractors, right? Like very few people own their plants and are vertically integrated. So what I've said to Nike and other people, I made a presentation there several years ago, there were 50 apparel companies in the room, and they were all involved in organic or wanting to be involved in organic, which was great. So I brought to this next level and said, look, if you could have a worker who had a vested interest in making a good quality product for you all the time and showing up at work, what would be wrong with that?
Yeah, and that's fantastic. Yeah. It's a win-win, right?
Yeah, we feel it is. Now, is it perfect? No. Have we had problems? You bet. But everything new has problems. And I think that part of this independent verification that you asked me about before, the labor certification, we need that part as well, because we need to make sure that each co-op is following its own rules and bylaws, and that each worker, in fact, really does have a vote. You know, human nature in groups, things can happen. So I think that if we can work out a way through all these certifications that are now coming on board to come up with a real program that can verify what claims are being made by sewers and cutters and knitters, et cetera, then we will really have something we can all tout as being better than the standard.
It's fantastic. So I'm sorry we're out of time, Benet, but thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Beth. I'm from the Midwest and didn't know about your show, but I've now signed on.
Oh, great.
I'm so glad I can listen to podcasts. You have a wealth of information on your show. I think it's just great.
Thank you. So Maggie's Organics,